Good morning. In our nation's capital, outside the National Archives building, there's a statue. And on the base of the statue is an inscription, a quote from William Shakespeare. It says, "What is past is prologue." There are far greater wonders available to each of us and to us as a whole than we could have dared dream. If we accept the concept that we're already spiritual beings having a human experience, there's no need then to get more spiritual. There's just a reason to awaken to who we really are. So there are far greater wonders available for all of us. In the Hebrew Scriptures, the Psalms, the 100th Psalm, starts with the words, "Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all lands. Come into his presence with singing." I'd like to read to you from the First Flag Act, of course passed by the Continental Congress at the time. "Resolved that the flag of the 13 United States be 13 stripes, alternate red and white, and that the Union be 13 stars, white in a blue field, representing a new constellation." Back in 1776, no TV, no radio, no internet. If you perhaps had the opportunity to read in the evening. But of course, one important thing to people back then was the astronomy and the astrology. The constellations, the signs of the zodiac. People assigned special meaning to each of them. You know, like I'm a Scorpio, you know, so. But for them, they're saying, no, we're going to have our own new constellation. A circle, without beginning, without end. All of us working together, despite the differences between us, that we've decided to do this all together. Also in Washington, D.C. is the Smithsonian Institution. It now has 19 buildings there along the mall in Washington. And one of the displays is a flag. I'm going to ask Jesse to show you this flag. This is the flag that flew above Baltimore's Fort McHenry during the bombardment of 1814. Look how big that thing is. I mean, this is one man standing here. So it's about 2.5 stories tall, probably about 25 feet and 25 feet wide. You'll also notice that there are 15 stars and 15 stripes. They added stripes each time they added a state for the first few, and then somebody started thinking, this isn't going to work. So they decided to limit the stripes to 13 to represent the first 13 colonies. But, of course, Francis Scott Key, was a prisoner on one of the British ships as they were just bombarding. But you could see, oh, you'll say, can you see by the dawn's early light? I mean, that sucker was big. But you also notice there are huge chunks of it missing. And you figure an entire 24 hours of bombardment by bombs. It really sends a message, doesn't it? When you think about it, this is 1814. This is 38 years after the Declaration of Independence was signed. And they were still battling Great Britain for independence. The sacrifice that people made, the unpleasantness they were willing to put up with so that they could have pleasantness. One of the founding principles, of course, is freedom. You've heard that word a lot this morning. And of course, a few weeks ago I mentioned how the way the word is thrown around these days, the people just, my freedom to do whatever it is that I want. And I mentioned that Friedrich Schiller, the German philosopher who lived from 1759 to 1805 and was a good friend of Goethe, said, freedom is not just doing what one wants, but becoming what one must. Freedom is not just doing what one wants, but becoming what one must. Each of us has special gifts, passions, and talents that were given to each of us so that we could express them in this physical world and make this world a better place. So we open our minds to the divine mind and allow the divine ideas to come. And with divine ideas, all we need to do is two things. First is to believe they exist, and then be willing to express the ones that are right and perfect for us to express. So we need to do what is ours to do. Thank you, Jesse. I'll have you move on to the next slide now. Now, as you know, I often like to look at Bible stories and look at the metaphysical symbolism of them. give you that deeper understanding about how these stories that were written 2,000 years ago or more can have specific meaning to our lives here in 2015. I thought it might be fun to take the Declaration of Independence and take a look at maybe the underlying meaning or maybe spiritual symbolism in the Declaration of Independence. As many of you know, Thomas Jefferson wrote the first draft, and he was a very spiritual man. So let's go through the Declaration of Independence. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, a declaration by the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled. When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. I can find a lot to preach on in that particular paragraph. But it's important that if we're going to make a change in our life, if we're going to do something, are we really clear about what it is that we want to do? What are we ready to change? And that usually means we need to let go of something so that we can embrace something new. So if we are committing to something, can we commit with a level of commitment that says, I will defend this with my life? Because that's what these people were doing. They were going to be branded traitors to the Kingdom of England. In fact, John Hancock, as many of you know, is big, wrote real big. The reason he wrote that was not that he was an egotist. He was a wanted man from the King of England. He actually had a bounty on his head. And so he was just kind of like, King of England? He wanted big heads. He said, I wanted to write my name real big because I know the king's eyes are failing him and I wanted to be able to read my name. Yeah. So, we're separating from a former state of belief or a state of mind, belief system. Every day we should choose to make a declaration of independence for ourselves as individuals. Letting go of the stuff that doesn't work anymore in our lives. Letting go of the stuff that doesn't work for us as an organization. And if we're going to change, it's a good idea to ask for God's help. And as Thomas Jefferson, he was a deist, so he believed more in just a general, one God rather than a Christian God per se. So he slipped in laws of nature and of nature's God to just point out this isn't just a Christian thing, because you had a broad spectrum of beliefs there in the room. And I know here at Unity we actually, we host 12-step groups. On Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, we have Alcoholics Anonymous, or I guess they take in just about everyone. And on Tuesday nights, we actually have a over-the-spoon group, as far as heroin, cocaine, that sort of a thing. But one of their main components is, are you willing to admit that you've got a problem? If something isn't working for you anymore, are you willing to say, this isn't working anymore, and I'm willing to change, and I recognize that I need help. So we understand the power of that kind of a declaration. It's like, I want to change here. Okay, let's return to the declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Do you honestly believe that you have a right to happiness? This was the first organizing document in recorded history that said you have a right to the pursuit of happiness. It wasn't just a happenstance. This was your right. So are we really do we believe in a creator, as he put it here in the text? A creator that is ready to give us whatever it is that we desire. Not just the things that we need and the obligations we need to fulfill, but the desires. Do we believe that we deserve freedom, happiness, liberty? And for that matter, how does each of us define liberty? Is the liberty to follow your dreams, for you to have abundance in your health, in your occupation, in your relationships, in your financial supply, enough money in your life, and of course, spiritual awareness, that consciousness that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. What are the possibilities in our lives as individuals and as a group? Now, a quick note, sidebar. The signers of the Declaration of Independence actually came to an agreement on July 2nd. But there were certain things that needed to be changed in there. Because South Carolina was upset that there was an intention in there to end slavery. And so they had to redraft it and sign it 2 days later. But one of the interesting things here was that Thomas Jefferson had this amazing phrase in there: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There was a common concept back then, I think it was Locke that wrote it, that everybody has the rights of life, liberty, and property. Life, liberty, and property. And of course, slave owners consider slaves to be their property. So by putting in this pursuit of happiness, not only was it the first time that a country had said you have the right to pursuit of happiness, it was also just a rejiggering of this phrase that most people at the time knew. Wait a minute, life, liberty, and property. He's saying life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's different, isn't it? Let's return to the Declaration. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So spiritually, what is our government as individuals? What's going on in your mind? What's going on in your soul? What are you consenting to? As I've mentioned, there's the two polar opposites of love and fear. Love and fear. Some people think, wasn't it love and hate? No, hate is a reaction to fear. You express hate because you're afraid of something happening or not happening. So what are you giving your consent to? There's no greater despot on the face of the earth than that dictator, fear. Do we feel the need to do it all ourselves? Or are we willing to consent to work with others? And are we willing to consent that we're going to follow divine ideas? We're going to follow God. Each of us has an opportunity at some point in our life to embrace two divine ideas, and that is divine guidance and divine protection. Divine guidance and divine protection. So that we're guided in all that we do, and yes, that we're protected from harm throughout our lifetime, at least up until that point when we all need to pass away. It's just a matter of believing that that works. And I've had people say, oh, come on, divine protection, isn't that a bridge too far? It's fine, if you don't believe in the divine idea of divine protection, then don't believe it and you won't be protected. Okay, the Declaration once again. That whatever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles. So we have the right or the duty to just start to shed the negativity in our lives. Now I encourage people to don't get to the point where you're thinking that you can't ever have a negative thought. I realized over the years I was able to work it so that when I got to that tipping point, that 51% of the time I was thinking positively, it was an accomplishment. Negative thoughts will come up, but you don't have to jump on that horse and ride it. Just let it go on by. You know, if the wrong bus shows up here at the corner, don't kick the bus and curse it. Just let it go by and wait for the bus that you do want to come on. You are no longer the king or queen of my mind. Negativity. You see, a lot of us have to really embrace the idea that we can change our thoughts and change our feelings. It's just a matter of making the decision to do that, to not jump on that horse and ride it, not ride the wrong bus. We can change our thoughts and feelings. Now, in the Declaration it says, and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light or transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when the long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism. So many of us have already, at some point in our life, come to that day or that moment where you say, I cannot live like this anymore. You finally get to the point where you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. You know, it's okay, this hasn't worked. I'm not sure what to do. Opening up to God and say, okay, guide me here. What is mine to do? What is mine not to do? What is mine to say? What is mine not to say? All I know is what I've been doing hadn't been working very well. Give me liberty or give me death. Now, the rest of the declaration is about 30 paragraphs outlining exactly why they're making this decision, why they are objecting to the West India Corporation coming in. In other words, the corporation of the Crown of England, because they were undercutting all of the local merchants. They're trying to put all of the local tea shops. You know, tea shops back then were like Starbucks are now. I mean, little coffee shops all over the place. They had little tea shops all over the place. And here, England was basically undercutting their price to try to put them all out of business and corner the tea drinking market here in the United States. And that, of course, was one of the reasons they turned to coffee as well. But the people just said, we're not going to take this anymore. You know, each of us wants to have an opportunity to express what it is that we want to express. If we want to go into a business, if we have a passion for a tea shop, you shouldn't tell us that we have to shut down and buy your tea. The spiritual lesson is that we need to realize what is possible in our lives as individuals and as a group. Almost unbelievable accomplishments for the greater good of all, of humanity. So yeah, by expressing your gifts, what you recognize is you're not just helping yourself, you're helping the world be a better place. So are we ready to make our own individual declaration? No matter what we're facing, whatever we have to go through, recognize we don't go through it alone. Yeah, we have God, but we also have each other if we're just willing to ask for help. If we're willing to reach out, if we're willing to network. In God we trust. So we declare our freedom from fear. And to declare that freedom, yes, we need to embrace love, and we need to have courage as well. Courage to step forward and do that. How about our freedom from addiction? If you have an addiction, you recognize it's a willingness to embrace the emotional pain of something that's happened in your life. When you're willing to actually embrace that, maybe step into the dark night of the soul, the depression, and just be able to reconcile that. Then you don't need to numb your feelings anymore by abusing some substances. What about unworthiness? Freedom from unworthiness. And that means we need to embrace that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. We are worthy. Guilt, remorse. Well, forgiveness solves that. Same thing with resentment or hurt feelings. You know, I can't believe that person did that to me. Well, can you now trust that there was a divine order that it knocked you into a different direction that's actually leading to your higher good if you just notice it? What about if you're in a job that you hate? Well, you've got a choice of letting it go, yeah, quitting, or maybe changing your attitude about it. Again, change your thoughts, your feelings, your attitudes. Because it's you know, our minds are amazing meaning-making machines. We assign a meaning to events, to people's actions or inactions. Same things with a job. Sometimes it's just a matter of a shift in attitude there. And I have known some people that have made the shift in attitude because they had a supervisor that they just hated, but they shifted the attitude and said, well, I'm going to do my job a great way. And what do you know? The supervisor moves on and a new person comes in, and suddenly the whole attitude, the whole atmosphere of the workplace changes. And if we have an abusive relationship, same thing. Are you willing to leave it? Or are you willing to issue an ultimatum? I'm familiar with one woman who complained for several decades about her husband drinking. But when she finally set the ultimatum that she would leave if he didn't stop drinking, she left. Suddenly he cleaned up his act, became sober, became the man she always wanted him to be. And suddenly they could have a healthy relationship from that point forward. So, when is this going to happen for you and for me? When are we going to have that independence? Let's not put it off into the future. Let's declare it and embrace it now. In the first letter to John, 3rd chapter, 2nd verse, it says, "Beloved, we are children of God now." Not tomorrow, not next week, not next year, not after I get my degree, not after the children are gone, off to college or off into their own lives. Now. Now. You don't have to wait. So let's return to the closing paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. "We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for our intentions, do in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states." So, as Unity Truth students, we are assembled here today to declare our independence from fear and our freedom to live our lives as spiritual beings having a human experience, expressing love in this world. And remember, freedom is not just doing what one wants, but becoming what one must. Our closing story is a 3-minute video from Steve Hartman of the CBS Evening News about someone that will show us all the things that we take for granted.
Of all the soldiers at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, no one takes his Army commitment more seriously than Peter Cooch. By all accounts, this 36-year-old sergeant does every drill, tackles every task with the same undying devotion.
I'll do my job to the best of my ability until the last day I leave the Army. I'll always remember it's the country that I'm serving.
His love for this country began in a whole other world. As one of the lost boys of Sudan, Peter was torn from his parents during the Sudanese Civil War. At the age of 8, he and thousands of other children were forced to trek across the desert on their own. Many died along the way. The lucky ones, seen in this video from a 2001 60 Minutes story, ended up at refugee camps, and a few thousand very lucky ones were eventually allowed to come to the United States. Peter got a job, worked his way through college, and then joined the Army as a thank you to America. As for his mom and dad, Peter never saw them again.
I was hoping, that's what I was saying. I said, God, I hope my parents are okay. And I kept that hope and that faith for a long time.
Until just a few weeks ago, when the Army gave him leave and a friend bought him a ticket to go back and see him. His mom especially was completely overwhelmed.
As soon as she saw me and we hugged each other, she just collapsed on my hand.
Fainted?
Yeah, she fainted. After like a good 3 minutes, she came back up and she put her hands on my head and she started praying before even she said anything, you know. And she said that I knew all this time that God would bring you back to me.
Peter says for the rest of his stay, his parents loved on him like a baby. And although he will return to see them, he says he could never go back.
America will always be my home regardless. This is my home.
What's amazing to me about you is you're out in the desert for weeks on end. You say you didn't cry. Your friends are dying next to you. You didn't cry. You get to talking about America and you start crying.
That's the one thing. I love this country so much.
Sometimes you have to go full circle to see how far you've come. Peter now has a 4-year-old boy with more hopes and dreams than he could have ever hoped or dreamt for. All here in the country, he just can't thank enough. Steve Hartman, on the road, in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
From the Gospel of Luke, 17th chapter, 20th verse. Being asked by the Pharisees when the kingdom of God was coming, he answered them, "The kingdom of God is not coming with signs to be observed, nor will people say, 'Lo, here it is,' or 'There it is,' for behold, the kingdom of God is within you." And from the Gospel of Thomas, 113, "The kingdom of the Father is spread upon the earth, and humans do not see it." And may you always be open to God's guidance and grace. It is now time for our tithes and offerings. And for more than 100 years, Unity of Indianapolis has provided a positive religious experience for people who have experienced negative experiences in the past. We are an alternative. And if you'll just take a moment now to start thinking about what you're giving and how you give it. I recently had someone mention that, if everyone who came on Sunday gave another $7 a week, that we would cover our budget. But I was thinking about it and I realized, but that would just to say that the source of our church are the people who come on Sunday. God is the source of this church. As we discovered 2 years ago, through the many channel of God's abundance, we can have all that we need, all our obligations fulfilled, and our desires demonstrated. And that's true for you too. So take what it is you're going to give. If you give electronically on the unityofindy.com website, on the donate tab, just hold that amount in mind. Open your heart and pour love into what it is you're giving today. And then let's say the affirmation together on the screen. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I give, and all that I receive.